Daryl's goes back with me to the beginning of time too, in 2009. But anyway, so no question, don't feel uncomfortable, just ask away, and we'll just go, yes.
Can you identify yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry, my name's Diane Buckshnis, and this is Jim Ogonowski. I met Jim about 7 years ago. 7 years ago, he became familiar and interested in financials, and so when Mike Nelson took over, things became kind of chaotic, and so Jim was actually helping out a lot. So we have today put together just a basic understanding of the budget and what it represents, and hopefully by the end of this meeting, you'll understand why we believe it's not a good idea to vote yes for the $14.5 million levy.
So just elaborate a little bit of my background. Jim Ogonowski again, and Edmonds resident since 2008. So I've been here long enough. 40-year career managing a lot bigger programs in the city. Done budgets, hundreds of budgets in that 40 years. I've been retired 10 years now, and in those 10 years I spent a lot of time with the city, volunteered on the Citizens Housing Commission a number of years ago, and from there started to really get involved understanding our city's operations and our finances, and I think I've got a fairly good handle on the budgetary process and where our money is, where it's going, how it's been utilized, and we hope to share some of that with you. And really, like Diane said, we want to make this informal. We want to make sure we've got enough time for you to ask questions and do our best to answer your questions so you can make an informed decision.
And I also, as people may know me from council, I read everything and I kept everything. I could have a great bonfire. But anyway, so I brought budgets, I brought audit reports, I brought anything and everything, well, not anything and everything, but I have brought a lot of examples in case you have questions. We can go through them afterwards. So I'm available all afternoon if we need to do that. So let's get started. And here is, what is your budget? Your budget is comprised of 6 primary funds. Now this is your working capital general fund budget. So when we talk about the general fund, we're talking about the fact that there's general fund money, which is like, I suppose you can't see, but it's things like general fund is 001. There's money for the left, which is the insurance retirement fund. There's a marsh restoration fund that we started 017, where if you want to donate money to the marsh, that is kept, so it's a specific fund. We have special revenue funds, which we will be talking about. That's like your real estate excise tax, your Worcester City Commission, your gift catalog. It's just specialized accounts that sometimes are committed specifically, or sometimes are governed by laws, like the real estate excise tax fund 125 and 126. You can only do public works and parks and recreation for them. There's also other funds that come into play, which we'll go into the next one, but I'll stick to just our working capital here. There's also the capital projects fund, and that is basically what is governed by your CIP-CFP. The CIP-CFP is the comprehensive facilities plan and the comprehensive improvement plan. That is a budgetary, those are budgetary documents that go through with each budget cycle, and it's a 6-year plan of all of your projects. So in other words, like if you want to improve Yost Pool, which is in the CFP, and it's scheduled for 2030, it's indicated in there and the dollar amount. So all of that is extremely detailed. It's gone through as part of the budgetary process, and everything has to reconcile, and everything doesn't, you don't just throw stuff out there. Everything actually reconciles for how much the city can operate and do things on a yearly basis. Because you can only pave so many streets, you can only clean or fix so many sidewalks. You can't just, go out and, give $5 million to do street maintenance, because again, we have found that we have given money away for infrastructure improvement. We had a bond in 2021. The city has yet to use all that money. manpower to do the job. And that's nothing to say about the fact that the city employees are great, they do their job, but it's just a matter of sometimes they don't have enough people. Like our sewer plant is, you've read about our sewer plant right now is a big problem. And don't get me started on how it was approved, but anyway, so that's that. And then there's your enterprise funds. Now your enterprise funds are your utility funds. This is how your utility bills, as you notice, have been going up since 2009. In 2009, the city initiated a pay-as-you-go type of process, which meant that every 3 years, we would have we would have a consultant look at all of our projects, which were in the CIP-CFP, and determine what interest rates needed to be charged for those projects. Like, let's say the Seaview water retention, I can't think of it offhand, the retention pond, I'll just call it, it's not a pond, but that needed to be redone. So information like that is fed into this report. The report then tells council or tells us what the recommended utility rate should be. Like, you can only do so many pipe replacements and sewer replacements and things like that. So that is your sewer, stormwater, and water. And next year, I hate to tell you this, but your sewer rates will go up 10.5% because we're still having a sewer problem with the sewer plant. Your water is going to go up 9%, and the storm is going to go up 8%. Did you have a question? Okay. I did not vote for that it's coming up next year. I did not vote for that because, in my opinion, when we did that rate study back then, they put in 6 months of reserves, which we didn't even have a policy for reserves, and industry standard only had a 3-month requirement. Because again, if you go out bonding, because utility bond, we do utility bonds, which is called revenue bonds, to do major projects. You don't just pay for it out of your utility rates. We could never do that. I did not vote for that because of the 6-month, and then they put $23 million aside for the Linwood sewer plant, which the Linwood sewer plant, for a 10% or 11% percentage, would have been a $230 million project. They had not even conceived of it, so I thought that was just sort of pulling money into the report. And then they did another $23 million for our sewer plant, but considering our sewer plant is in year 6 of still shipping sludge, that may be a good estimate. But anyway, so that's how your utility rates are presented. Some people ask for source data, some council members don't. I always do, and that's why I voted no. So those are your enterprise funds. And then there's your internal service funds. Your internal service funds are like, if you wanna go out and buy a car, which the police went and bought a whole bunch of cars, I think you've noticed that. Every month, each department puts money aside into this 5 to 11 fund account. And so it accumulates so that you have money to buy a car when a car is needed to be bought, or a big Vector. So that is internal service fund. It's just automatically, the different departments don't even see it. And again, if you go into the budget, it'll tell you your department number and who is what and all that. So each department monthly just continues to put money into this account. And then there's a technology rental fund. When I was on council, that came into effect, and it basically is for technological stuff. That is not a requirement by the MLSC, but we still have it, and so we have it, we do it. So
MLSD.
and MLSC, municipal.
I don't care what it is.
Oh, it's like the attorneys of like council members can write to this group, and it's like your experts, like GAAP, government accounting principles. You have a GAAP board you can go to, or you can have, so it's I'll just tell you right offhand, I'll just Google it. But they're experts, so they're experts in the field of, that's not the science. I'll get it for you. But anyway, so it's just the attorneys that can answer questions, council members can send them in questions like, what is the investment portfolio? Why is the investment portfolio separate from the general fund? So they can ask questions like that and they can get answers, so, yeah. And I'll get you that, what it is. Okay, so where the money comes from and where the money goes. Now, this is your total balance sheet, because I know people were a little bit upset with me when I had the 10-6 discussion, because I showed this graph as opposed to the graph that My Edmonds News showed that had a 28%. Again, the 28% would be based on these categories. So if you were to take the money, which here is about 60 million, and show the property taxes, it is about 28%. But if you were to look at the entire balance sheet, property taxes are about 12%, and it does show that sales tax make up a good chunk of change, and that's because, of course, we have our car dealerships, and we also have our small businesses. We have some very good tourism going on, and then you can see again, which is not something that makes sense, should make sense to you, is that utility services are very high. These are your capital projects, because again, this is your this would be your bond payments. So your utility is high. Your public safety, this is 2025. Now your public safety, we have a police budget now of $19 million. So that takes up a large amount of change, and like I had said before, if in fact we can do a levy group next year, and we did a levy group in 2010 and I was on it, if we were to do a levy group, I would have a specific levy so that people would vote for. We could do a $6 million levy just for the police, rather than right now we have we have just a myriad of things for this 14.5. So you can see that we do have a public safety, and we will go into details as to why that's so much, and I feel it's too much, but we do want to appreciate the fact that we love our police force. Another thing that is excluded from, or is included in this 2025 is that the use of funds, which is 11%, is that like teal one, that includes your RFA. So your regional fire has been removed now. That's $12.1 million that was in the budget is now gone. So that's again a good thing for us, because we don't have to worry about finding $12.1 million. So this sort of gives you an understanding that municipal finance is very complex, and so we want to try and make sure that things take effect. And again here, since I showed the contract over here in your public safety, that also includes your fire and EMS. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, you may.
It's my understanding that there was still an assessment related to the fire district that was being retained in the city budget.
Yes.
And is that represented under other government grants at 5.5%?
It would, are we
Where
looking?
does it show up in the?
Well, it would show up in the 2026 budget, and it would show up as a revenue, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
it's distributed. What the city did when we annexed into the RFA, and to your point, our RFA expense, what we were paying under contract, was $12.1 million. We were also getting revenue by the EMS tax on us, and that revenue was about $4.5 million, $5 million. So the difference between the 12 and the 5, $7 million is what the city is retaining, as opposed to refunding it to us. They're retaining it and using it, distributing it throughout the rest of the budget in 2026.
Right, it's going into the general.
It's going into the
back
general
in,
fund, right?
yes.
Exactly right. It's
Yeah.
staying in the general fund.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So, just to make it, these $6-7 million that the city is making off here and dumping to the general fund, it's on top of the
Absolutely, it's on
16
top.
million.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
it's
Yep.
not 16, it's actually 23.
Yep.
They are,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
We don't wanna,
You're getting there.
we don't overly complicate things, but yes, your line of
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah,
is
yeah.
very correct.
Yep.
And so, you know, my opinion is, we need to like take a pause and see what that RFA, well, I know what I'm gonna have to pay, but I mean, people are gonna have to pay a hefty RFA and excess new tax. So, and that just is for homeowners, whereas again, the levy would impact renters, business owners, blah, blah, blah. But from a homeowner standpoint, I think we need to take a pause and see what citizens have to pay, and they have to see what they're gonna pay, because it's gonna be substantial. I mean, for me, I think it's substantial. But then
So another remark on this, these RFA things not for homeowners only, renters also, because I have a couple rentals, and I'm going to pass this to the.
Sure.
Well, you could, yeah.
Price of the.
Yeah, you can,
Okay.
up to 7%.
Yeah, I will,
Yeah.
because I'm not paying for the tenant to stay in my house.
Yeah,
That's-
yeah, okay,
No,
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Okay, so we kinda wanna get into how things, you know, again, historically, what's going on. So Jim is gonna handle,
So there's been a lot of discussion about how inflation has impacted the city, and it impacts all of us, right? And in this chart, it was created from city documents. So it's nothing that I made up in terms of numbers or anything, I just put into a visual format. And what this chart highlights is different accounts, our utility revenues, I mean, Diane talked about that. Our total city revenue has increased since 2003 by 175% in terms of how much we as a community have provided the city to service us, our utilities, our police, our fire, etc. Over that time, the consumer price index down here increased about 80-75% over that time. So the total revenue the city's taken in has outpaced the CPI by a substantial amount over time. Now the other piece of this is our property taxes. Our property taxes, being capped by the 1%, have indeed lagged CPI, but being only 12% of the total budget, the impact isn't that great when the total budget is eclipsing the CPI over time by a substantial amount. I
and,
see a acquisitive face here. Is that?
I'm just looking and making sure you're talking about revenue, not expenses.
No, this
No,
is revenue. This is what we're taking in.
Wow.
Now, on the expense side, we have balanced budgets. So basically, your expenses are mirroring that too, because it's got to be a balanced budget. But this puts it so. Most of the time, the discussion is just down here comparing the CPI against our property taxes. But we're getting in a lot of other revenue that's far outstripping the property tax, the 1% cap that brings in. So me, as an analyst, say that, hey, there's something else going on here. It's that we've got revenue coming in. Is it being managed properly? So if you go to the next.
So just a quick
well, I
question.
have to put in my unbanking statement, because if you notice, there's a straight line between like 2019 and 2024. And what we did as a council was we had good reserves. We had really good operating without Al Compan as chief, with Mayor Erling. The council decided to bank property taxes, so that 1% never flowed through. It was banked into I don't know what, we just called it a bank, but it was put aside. And so in 2024, when you see that blip, that's about $500,000 in unbanked taxes from previous years. So council also was a somewhat of a cause for this, but we were listening to citizens, and we knew, again, we were still going through the pains of having some of us were still in the recessionary problem. I know interest rates were low right then. Remember, we were going through that whole, whatever you wanna I call it the second crash of 2006, but anyway, so that's what we were doing, we're being considerate of our taxpayers.
So if you wonder why you feel like your water bills have been going up, yeah, they have, right?
And you can blame us too, council on that.
So, Jim, I have a quick
Sure.
question. That's our total revenue.
Right.
Of course, the yes side always wants to compare CPI to property tax. And then I've heard, maybe I misunderstood this, but that, well, you can't necessarily look at the total revenue, you have to look at where the funds are going, and we can't move funds around.
Well, okay, we'll talk
We'll
about that.
get- yeah, we'll
Good
get-
segue. Hold that thought, and if I don't hit on it, kind of come back. But I
Figured
got
you
got
would,
some
I just
got
figured.
some talk.
What are loan proceeds?
I'm sorry.
4.5% loan proceeds?
Loan proceeds are like your bond payments, and this is 2025, is this
Yeah, yeah,
2025?
This is revenue.
Well, you have to pay out you have to pay out your interest on your bonds.
But that would
And
be an
then-
expense, not a revenue.
Well, you got interest payments from the
Oh,
money
yeah,
that's in the bank.
opposite, yeah.
Oh, okay, that's.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we're
No.
collecting what we're not using is in the bank collecting interest, and
Got it,
that would
got
be
it.
reflected there. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And the city at one point in time had two loans to the, I don't know if they still do, Edmonds Waterfront Center, secured by a CD, as well as the PFD or the ECA, secured by CP, so that could also be that, or the CD, sorry. Okay,
Another somewhat of a misconception is that the city has cut or saved $7 million in labor costs in this last year. I keep hearing that, and when I look at the numbers, I can't find it. So all I did here was plot what our budget is for labor and benefit. I mean, this is public information, it's in our budgets, and over time, that's what this line shows. I mean, there's how much we expend on a yearly basis for wage and benefits. I challenge the city to show me where there's a $7 million reduction in those numbers. I mean, I can't continuously hear them talk about it,
I can answer that.
but I don't see $7 million reduction here at all. So they quantify it as dollars. I look at dollars, I don't see it. Now, having said that, the mayor just 2 weeks ago proposed a modified budget for 2026, assuming that the $14.5 million levy lift passes. So that was just presented to the city council. They, in essence, approved it. Included in that is over 50 more employees. So if I put that point on here, in terms of the expenses, and draw my line, that's a yearly 18% year-over-year expense increase. That's unsustainable. Completely now what the city doesn't show us yet is the forecast. He presented a 2026 budget that just showed 2026. He didn't show what happens in 2027, 2028, 2029 when you increase headcount by that much.
And I have to.
Wait,
Oh.
you got a
I just
question?
have a clarifying question. Of those 54 employees, how many are police? How many would be for the police department? Do you know?
For the police?
Yeah, that's a huge part of
I
it.
think
Is
nine,
I think, yeah, cause what they're doing is they're adding.
nine or 11.
Yeah, they're adding back in like, community service and, night watch or yeah. It's all in here. We can look at it afterwards, yeah.
And my other question was just, do we know the increase in benefits costs? Like, health insurance for companies is skyrocketing, so that's kind of out of control of the city, so that.
It's embedded in there. They're
Right.
assuming a 5% increase
Okay.
year over year on benefits, and I think like 3.5 or 4% on cost of living adjustment for wages. That's embedded in these numbers. Yep.
And what I wanna say though is the 2022 budget, it was a tragedy going through. I was dancing the Macarena at my niece's wedding when the adjournment meeting went through. Christiana Johnson was at dialysis, and Will Chin was going to be installed or was going to be E1. So 3 elected officials did not approve this budget. And that has never happened in the history of budget approvals. It was pushed through by the council president. It is a bloated budget, and once you have a bloated budget, it's very difficult to go back and retain what happened. But what was happening was like $500,000 was given away to the Human Services, a new department, which fell underneath Parks and Recreation. The municipal finance, or municipal court was all redone. The clerk was put under administrative services. The police department had 3 new, like, commanders, which were like non-rep. And again, so what happened is none of these issues to support all of this, because if you add another director under a director level, like, as an example, Al Compan was making $176,000, had been with the city for many, many, many years, beloved person, good friend of mine, so I think he's great. Chief Bennett left at $296,000 when she retired. Current chief of police is at $236 now, but if you were to compare just between 2022 and 2024, it's about a 30 to 32% increase in all of the police chief, the higher echelon. So not the beat cops, but the higher echelon. And then you see 15% increase in all of the administrative, like, directors, so your directors, because they now have people under them. And what also is a consideration that, to me, was never addressed, is that all directors have like the same pay, regardless of the fact that your public works director does a whole lot of work. And he just got hired at 196, but the Parks and Rec can have the same salary level, so that the steps were all like cohesively just high. So Will Chen and I, Councilmember Chen and I, you know, we were not responsible for that, and that's why it's, to me, very difficult now. We need to get back to basics on the control of the expenses, because we're not Redmond, we're not Issaquah, we're Edmonds, which is, the population has not changed that much. Okay.
Before you move on,
Yeah.
just part of what you're talking about, another component of the budget is the union contracts that
Yes.
have to
Correct.
constantly
Yes.
negotiated.
Yes.
And I guess we don't negotiate with fire anymore.
No.
But there's, I think, 4 different
Yes.
unions that the
Well,
city.
I think, well, the commanders created another union, so I think there's like 6 now. But yeah, there's all these different unions, which again takes a lot of work. You know, you
But
can't.
it also has obviously a direct impact on the amount of cost of the salaries that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and the benefits.
Yes.
So it sort of boils down, one of the components of the budget boils down to how well those contracts are negotiated. and
Correct.
What has been given away and guaranteed over a period of time.
Yes.
Okay,
And-
if I may, let me pick up on that a tad here, because I'm coming from the corporate world, with unions and that, and unions, they've got their place, and I come from a union family, so, not disparaging unions at all, but what the city has done, and let's use police as an example, the city has tied the non-represented, the non-union police
Employees.
staff, they've tied their wages directly to the negotiated wages of the represented employees. So as the represented employees renegotiate their wages, all the command staff automatically gets a bump above that. In the private sector, we don't do that. I mean, when you get into management type positions, you're compensated in other ways, and your expectations are different. And to tie it explicitly to a negotiated doesn't give any flexibility. So where I'm going with this, what is the incentive of the police chief to negotiate a wage for his employees, or his or her employees? Just saying,
I wasn't
just saying,
disparaging-
right?
Yeah, I wasn't disparaging
But
either.
so
I was
there-
just saying it's a factor of the budget.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
right,
is a
yeah,
factor.
it is a facet, but once you get into it, you start to uncover all these other intricacies in there that kind of scratch my head. Why do we do it?
And I do wanna address the $7 million. the budget authority still, and it's funded in the budget, but they haven't collapsed. They haven't done a budget amendment to unfund those positions. So that's why they can say, we have saved $7 million, because they haven't fulfilled all of those positions. But why the numbers aren't showing that is because it's still in the budget. So they could still technically fill that position, or what we're seeing now is there's quite a few people that are retiring or leaving to another city. That unfunded amount remains as part of the budgetary savings, because it's not being paid out, or not, a budget amendment is not collapsing it down to zero. So that is your answer for that question. So in the mayor's mind, he has saved $7 million, but according to the numbers, again, numbers can't lie.
Right.
That's why numbers are my second language. But yeah, so that answers that question. So, okay.
Now this chart is one that the city doesn't want you to see. And let me try to explain it first what it depicts. This is just our general fund. So it's our fund balance of the general fund. How much we have year after year left over after we've paid all our expenses and everything in the general fund. We should be operating in the green section of this chart. When we get into the yellow, we're into our rainy day funds, if you want to look at it that way, which we call our emergency reserves. And in red, I think everyone can understand when you get in red, you're in trouble, right? So in 2021, at the end of 2021, we had a healthy $18 million in our general fund in reserves. We're good. The mayor at the time, Mayor Nelson, he looked at that and he said, we should be using some of that money for the public good. And I agreed with him. We should be. I mean, it's just sitting in the bank. It's not doing us any good, other than collecting interest, but the interest rates were low. So I kind of agreed, yeah, we should probably be using it. What I didn't expect was a rate at which he and the council approved to spend that. In 1 year, we went down that much. Within 2 years, we passed our threshold of going into using our emergency reserves, and in essence had to declare physical emergency in November of 2023. Within 2 years, we blew through $18 million. Okay, what do we get for it? You have some better service, better improvement? What do we get for it? Don't look at me to ask to answer, because I don't know. I couldn't tell you where we spent $18 million on. It's tangible, that's to the benefit of the residents. Okay, but we didn't stop there. We continue to spend. We use one-time ARPA money to balance a budget, and unbanked. Diane said about unbanking some of our previously banked capacity. We unbanked that to balance a budget. So we spent another $9.2 million that we one-time money in the ARPA money. You'd think we'd have learned and done something once we crossed that threshold, but we didn't. Our finance policy called for a fiscal recovery plan to be proposed to the council once we cross that threshold, once we declare the emergency within 2 months. 2 years later, we still don't have one. So we continue to bank. Then, this last year, we ended up taking a loan. We had to take a loan from one of our other funds to support the general fund. Didn't stop our spending, didn't start curtailing anything. Oh, we did a little bit, but not to the extent of where our emergency is. So, was this inflation? Was that inflation there? No. Inflation wasn't going rampant over that period of time. It was mismanagement. We just didn't manage our money very well. We spent like drunken sailors. So now, you know, we've agreed, as a community, we've agreed to the RFA annexation, and to the point that was made earlier, that we end up $6.5 million, the city's saving $6.5 million by not having to pay the fire contract. But that's just being rolled into the 2026 budget, on top of what they want to do beyond that. Now this line here is actually from our current adopted budget, the official adopted budget the city has. We've got this proposed one that the mayor has just put out there for 2026, depending on the levy limit. But this is the official document, and it shows that it was predicated on the council including a $6 million levy lid lift for 2026. Not 14.5 million, but 6 million. And it showed, and I was kind of okay with this, it showed a slow but steady recovery of our fund balance at $6 million. Hey, now, again, we still ended up doing the annexation, which was another burden for us, but aside from that, from a city perspective, this starts to show a recovery plan at
Okay.
$6 million.
So, council should have controlled the spending, which Will, Chen, and I tried, but we were only 2 of 7 people. I don't know if you remember this, the simple majority, all of that. But for a fact, we were not apprised of all the consultants that were being used. Consulting fees went up like 67%. There were consultants that one director spent $1.6 million in consulting fees in 1 year. Also, the good news is that we got another police unit, because we looked into annexing Esperance, and so out of that we got a seven because I think it's 5 B cops plus their service, so we got an additional 7 people. So that was a good thing that we had. But we also then had the police department grow. I don't know if some of you remember Landmark. Landmark was again done incorrectly with the council president and mayor announcing we're gonna buy this property, and council hadn't even been made aware of it, which again, long story short, we should have sanctioned the council president, but never happened, blah, 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 blah. But that was about $5 to $7 million that the city spent. Comprehensive plan was going on at that time, that was another 3 or 4 million. Mayor went to Heckanon with a director paid for by the city. That, again, it was like the Wild West. He called it drunken sailors, I just call it the Wild West. The problem that I had, and I still, when I read some of these documents, it really upsets me, was that Will and I were just, I might as well just been an empty seat. Will must have been an empty seat. We have many, many emails asking questions, tell us to do this, do that. Nothing ever happened. But, it was unfortunate. I think we see some of the same things happening today, which I'm glad we're having some new elections and we're having some mature, business-minded people that have chosen to run. I think what we need to really hope for next year is that we have two new council members that are strong financially and understand small business and big business and municipal finance, so that we can change, because the council controls the budget. This is the problem I had. The council has all the control of the budget, and every question we asked, we should have gotten answers. We did not. And we can go into specifics, because I know there's a whole lot of my Edmonds news out there about the $4.7 million that the auditors brought up, and that went from blah, 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 blah. We'll deal with that later. Again, I have all the audit reports, so I can answer stuff. The issue being, in my mind, is there's no oversight or any type of council responsibility saying, hey, tell me what you're doing, director. We had a director that was off for 6 months on a sabbatical, paid a tremendous amount of money, 6 months gone. And the auditors found it, happened the 2nd year, nothing done. So stuff like that is where, as a council member, it really bothered me, but nothing was done, we couldn't do anything. So, yeah.
So these various expenditures that you've just described, is that where the 18 million went?
Yep. Just
accumulated over a lot of
Yeah, yeah.
things, right?
I mean, again, it was like we gave the one director a $900,000 budget, and yet she spent 1.6 million. And it was like, no slap on the hand or anything. I mean, again, I grew up with the Alcom pen, and we kept the budgets, the professional services at, 200,000, conservative Erling, who kept things really, well, Scott James actually, the director, Scott James, the financial director, we kept things really tightly controlled. And so, yeah.
This is a little out there in terms of question, but who the hell are the people that are on the council? What kind of people do we, I mean.
Well, we
this is
elected them,
kinda
okay.
weird. I know we
No,
elected them,
yeah,
but
but,
what, who runs for county? I think there might be somebody.
We got some of them running for
Why is
council.
it-
I know, who in their right mind runs for council?
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Running for council?
first of all, let me acknowledge, it is a thankless job.
It is.
It is a thankless
Yeah.
job, because they're getting inputs from, people like me.
Yeah.
I mean, you should see the number of emails they've gotten from me over the years, right? Yeah, it's a tough job. Now, one of the recommendations that we're gonna make here, and it parrots what the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee said, the council needs some help. We recognize the council needs some help, so we're recommending that they establish a finance board or commission or something of that nature, comprised of external expertise to help the council navigate through this, because this is, like Diane said, it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, I'm a numbers person, so I kind of gravitate toward this. I'm an engineer by training and profession. But for many people, it's not their first passion or understanding to be able to spend the time to get into the kind of details that for instance, I have. And until you do and get appreciation, will you then start to understand some of this? I try to keep it a little bit high level here, but it gets really messy.
I mean, I joined council, or I applied for council when Washington Mutual blew up, because I was spitting nails. I had been an auditor before, examiner. It was just a Jamie Dimon or Chase bonus because they took over. You got to know all that stuff. But anyway, that's how I got involved. And then once I got involved, Darryl will tell you, the city was reporting their general fund as a modified working capital approach, which did not make sense. So, through time, and I had Michael Plunkett and Dave Orvis and, Strong was kind of there, sort of, but I had Steve Bernheim, I had really strong council members that helped push through policies and procedures and financial transparency and got rid of all that stuff. But yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. And as time went on, I was even criticized, or Christiana Johnson was criticized by her fellow council members for being too, whatever, asking too hard. It's, it's just like,
So
I don't like to think about it, but.
Kind of a time check. How long do we have this?
Oh, we gotta get going.
Wait,
Yeah, sorry.
up front.
wait. How long do we have the room for?
12:30, 1.
Okay,
1.
because it's important. I just want to make sure that we get questions answered.
Oh, yeah, so if you're asking for outside help with the council members, isn't that something very similar to consulting? And what was when you had said consulting before, but the expenditure on consultants, what were they consulting on? So, is in the remedy of the council members seeking outside help
Good question.
would be consulting?
Good question. I mean, the mayor has hired a consultant to help him through this. What our recommendation, and it came out of the Blue Ribbon Commission, so we were just hanging on to that recommendation, was to, like we have a planning board or
Tree
housing
board.
commission or that,
Housing commission.
where it's a citizen group that got skin in the game as opposed to a consultant who doesn't have skin in the game to be part of the advisory to. So that's really the distinction that we're making.
Like in 2010, when we did the levy committee, Michael Plunkett and I, in the finance group, we had each council member pick one volunteer, and then we went through and I don't know if some of you remember, but we did 3 different budgets, one for streets, one for parks, and one for public safety. Of course, they all failed, but they were, you know, again, at that point in time, we were still going through that huge recession. We probably should have just did one levy and not three, and Daryl was a helper on that, but the fact of the matter is, you know, we had all these different people come and talk, and the school board's very successful in doing single, you know, this levy for this amount. So we thought at least one of them would have won, but they all failed terribly. So that is what I think would be a good idea, is if the next council then could each pick someone to be on this levy committee, because we are gonna need a levy, that's pretty obvious. And we're not anti-tax, but we just want to make sure you understand the complexity of municipal finance, and that there is funds, and there are different ways to, you know, skin the cat, although we won't skin cats.
So, okay, so if the levy passes, the $14.5 million levy passes, this is what our tax bill will look like compared to neighboring South Sonoma County cities. We go from where we are right now, buck 30 something, to over 3 per $1,000 of assessed value. Far eclipsing any of our neighbors, including Woodway. One could believe that, right? But so this is what it would look like. It almost adds another buck per assessed valuation than the $14.5 million. We're already taking a big hit just by going with the RFA that we just approved. So between the RFA and this, we go from there all the way up to there.
And, you know, our income demographics, you may be able to afford it, but think about the person sitting next to you in church or at the grocery store, or the young family trying to move forward. We do have a lot of wealthy people. You know, I know Rick Steves, he's a great guy. We have a lot of wealthy people in the city, but that doesn't represent all of Edmonds that live here. We wanna be, you know, like single, you know, like people like me, so. Anyway, what happens if it fails? Were you gonna do this or me? I can do it. Okay, well, it's pretty simple. We hope, but we just never know. Again, you never know what's gonna happen in an election, because you never know the turnout. But, the city would, if it fails, the city rate would remain the same. So again, we would go back here and we would look at what we're looking at the bottom. The $6.5 million in the contract savings stays in the budget. Combination in $6 million in new revenue, which we will show you we're suggesting to happen, has to offset that $6 million in the forecasting. So in other words, in the budget that was approved in 2025, 2026, it showed a $6 million levy amount. That levy amount suddenly changed 6 months later with whatever reason. So we wanna make sure that we have found that $6 million, which we have. The city has defined dramatic cuts in service, which again, the city council has control of rescinding that 1570 resolution, so that we don't have to see Yost Pool, which I have no idea why they're closing Yost Pool, because it's run by a nonprofit, or the water park, why they're gonna close it, you know, all those things that they say. I do know for a fact the Edmonds Stream team hasn't used any of their money, so it won't impact them, but they put a whole variety of things that are gonna happen, and I know people that have come to me and they're gonna vote yes just because they're afraid that the Francis Anderson Center will close. The Francis Anderson Center may close like it did during COVID, but we have it, like I said, we have a new council hopefully coming on board January 1st. They can just, first thing they do is write the resolution to rescind. Done. You know, it proves to the old council members and the mayor, we don't wanna play these stupid games, or these draconian games. So we will show you the alternate budget, and the city is committed to finding $5 million in non-property tax revenue. We already know that the red light cameras are working. I got my ticket, you heard that. Very expensive ticket, and I still do rolling stops, so I'm sure I'll get one more. And they also have
Thank you for contributing.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Ouch, I know. And they go contest, I'm like, but I did it. Anyway, and then there's a new sales tax that is going to go on, which is 0.01%, and that should bring about $1.3 million into the budget. And then remember, well, you don't know all this, but, the city decided after the fire contract was given away, was stopped, they gave away 6 million of the 7.1. So the budget already has a surplus of 1.1. So you can really, I can piece the numbers together. So if I can piece them together, I'm sure the city can piece them together. And then here is, we have the money. This again is just the general fund. And again, it takes legislative action to do this, but they have, so we have the general fund at 7.17. In the special revenue category, remember I talked to you about the REIT money, which is a real estate excise tax, which is every time real estate is sold, there's a tax attached to it. In Housing Bill 1790 that happened in 2024, it allowed for flexibility in REIT 2, which means that they can now do, rather than just doing capital projects and streets and things like that, they can now do operation and maintenance. So operation and maintenance can be funded through REIT money, which we have about 4 million. And then also housing related uses such as planning or acquisition of land for affordable housing. And we do have some of those on our pipeline. So that's a good news. There's another thing that I don't know why it's not brought up, but we got a wonderful gift from Mr. Buffetti in 2023 that was $4 million in a trust for our city and beautification. That beautification, we've used about 1.1 million, so it was higher than 4 million, but that allows for FTEs. The city has not taken advantage of that, or maybe they have, we don't know, because they just have all the signs saying that the parks are closed, so we don't really know what the financials are in terms of use of that fund. And then there is the internal service fund, which we talked about, 511 and 512, which is a technology fund, and the car rental fund. This actually can be transferred up into the general fund. It was in 2020, of course, without council approval, so I never found out about it after I had to read the audited report, but that is available, and that is something that we are going to propose, or we have proposed, and I want Jim to.
Wait, can you go back? I
Yes.
just wanna make another point on this, or re-emphasize the point. Because I don't wanna misrepresent the mayor in terms of what he proposed. You know, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, he proposed a new budget. He has only so much authority on the budgetary piece. He can propose things, but he can't enact it. I mean, it's a council's budget. So the council, and that's a legislative body, right? So they have to take legislative action to make this happen. But they can do it. The mayor can't do it unilaterally. So I don't want to put the blame on the mayor that he should have just done this. He can't do it. But the council can, and they should have, and they still can. And that's the crux of part of our argument here, is that, are we really telling the full truth or part truths? And I'm suggesting that there's more opportunity available out there, but it does require the council, as a body, need 4 votes to make this happen. But it's within their authority to do it.
And I finally looked up, it's MRSC, which is, because ML is like, has to do with real estate. Oh, well, brain fart. Anyway, MRSC is a municipal research and service center. So I wanted to make sure that Jim, because Jim asked me a long time ago, was accurate. So I did contact MRSC to specifically ask if in fact we can do this. And MRSC did in fact respond back to me and say yes. And that the 511 fund, which is the equipment fund, should stay open because you have utility money coming in and general fund money. So you have 2 different funds coming in, and so you can't, again, because they're enterprise funds, you can't buy a so that would be a little complicated, but it still can be done, cause like I said, it was done in 2020 where they moved 1.5 million. And then the other one is a technology fund. MRSC said there's no need for a technology fund, so that could totally be collapsed. Okay, so, another thing I didn't bring up is that, again, as part of this RFA annexation, we have found that we were not paid all of our money owed us for the ground emergency medical transport fees, which Jim has spent hundreds of hours in public records requests and going and talking to the state and doing all of this information to determine that he's accurate, and I believe he is, but $15 million is owed the city for ground emergency management medical transport. Apparently the city is in mediation. They have not said anything where they are in mediation. There's nothing that precludes city officials from talking about mediation, but for some reason that this city attorney does not want to disclose any type of mediation reasons or things like that. But that is something that will be a bonus for us, because if you were to look at our contract, the city allowed $5.6 million in real estate assessed values, 2 stations, to just be given to the RFA. And we could have sold those we could have sold those fire stations and not even have a hole to worry about. So again, it goes back to governance and understanding the budget and understanding the complexities of these transactions, which in my mind is the reason why we need some new business-minded council members. Okay,
Good.
so, and I hope I'm.
Okay, so this is first chart we saw at the beginning of the presentation, and what we're suggesting is to, like, this is just kind of recap what Diane just went through, transferring some of the this money up into the general fund and utilizing these other funds a little bit differently than they have been in the past, utilizing more of that fund balance. Right now, the only fund that we've got a problem with is the general fund, the very top fund in there. That's the one that I showed you where it goes near the red. All the other funds are well funded. In fact, some, and what we're suggesting here, are overfunded. Money just sitting, your money sitting in the bank, yeah, collecting interest at whatever interest rate, but not being put to the use that you originally, or we as a community originally allocated the city to use the money on our behalf. So all we're saying is, hey, let's take some of that money and reappropriate it, put it to use for 2026, and then come back in 2024, 2027 levy that's much more reasonable and more affordable. So this kind of is a summary of all of that. The bottom line now, the scale is expanded because of the dollar amounts we're talking about now. But this bottom line is what we showed on the previous chart, where it's the currently adopted budget, which includes a $6 million levy lift. Going up to the $14.5 million skyrockets, you know, the intake of revenue and fund balance. Now this is all assuming the equivalent level of spending. So you spend more, well, these lines will start to come down. What we're suggesting is that there's a middle ground here that's more affordable, that, yeah, doesn't get up to clearing, you know, our hurdles here until a little bit later, not a lot later, but a little bit. But something that we believe is a little bit more affordable, a little bit more reasonable for the city to consider. This was presented to the city prior to the the budget and all that.
Budget retreat.
Yeah, prior to the budget retreat. That's how much feedback I got. Zero. Absolutely zero feedback. Quiet crickets from City Hall. Why? I don't know, but I mean, I provide plenty of ideas over the years, but so it didn't surprise me. But so they had this, they knew it. They could have asked the probing questions. They chose not to. I see it. Was there a question? No. Okay.
Okay, I have to finish out here, but there's a couple of things I want to put out here too. If I'm not mistaken, there is no lockbox on this money.
I'm sorry,
There's no lockbox on this money. It can be put out there that the levy is for paying for parks and paying for this and paying for that, but basically the money would go into the general fund and could be reallocated.
Okay, so I'm gonna rephrase it a little bit. The lockbox is, the levy is, allocated toward police, parks, and.
Planning,
Yeah,
police,
whatever.
parks,
So
planning.
in that sense, it is, but what happens behind the scenes is that they'll use that money for its intended purpose, but then reallocate what was going into those to everything else that they wanna fund outside of that. So it's a movement of money, but, so the only, I don't know whether I wanna say correction, is that they have to use the money, for the levy as it was proposed, and they easily can spend that. I mean, like, Diane said, $19 million, it just goes to the police on an annual basis, so that in itself, you could fund the whole police under the levy and it'd be legal. So there won't be anything illegal done. I'm not,
That wasn't
right,
suggested.
yeah, no, and I'm
saying
not either.
They can just
right.
play with.
But there will be a movement, and we don't see that. In what the mayor's proposed a couple weeks ago, we don't know where all that money went yet, how it was redistributed amongst all the accounts, you know, the 36 accounts that you saw us show you. We don't know where all that money is.
Well, and the second point, totally different though, but I know it's in the mailing that just came out from this group, is the effects on small businesses. And there's an additional factor in all of this, in that we could easily lose a lot of our small businesses from the community, which would decrease sales tax revenues.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's certainly a lot of cascading repercussions,
cascading.
unintended consequences, however you wanna say it, that hard to forecast.
Cause if I'm gonna be paying, not only $800 extra plus $1,800 extra, or $2,600 extra on my property taxes, I can't afford to go out or spend money. I mean, again, I'm a single, I have one income, my social security, so,
I don't have a question, but I do have a statement.
yeah.
It's a soft form of gentrification, because we have a mixed community. We have apartments, condos, studios, mansions. We have all kinds of buildings.
Right.
And slowly, and we're all in the water. It's a soft way of pushing the middle class
Right.
away from the water.
Right.
That's how I see it, and I see a lot of opportunities there. I'm really stunned that you didn't get a response past the strongly worded letter, but I do have a lot of passion about this, because I see a lot of waste.
Oh, no, yeah, I agree.
One area of
Absolutely.
waste that I see constantly
Yep.
is, I don't know who's running the legal department there, but the settlements blow my mind.
Oh, yeah.
It's just come and get a job here for 3 days and we'll give you a settlement. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that later, but.
Oh, no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
There's
And they, in fact, even they've gone over and above for directors that
beyond.
they've given extra severance. Oh, no, the attorney and he doesn't like me.
That used to be my business, and when I see the numbers, I'm
Yeah.
shocked that those numbers are approved.
Well, here's a really good example, the car, I'm very environmentalist, I'm sure many of you know that, when I was on council, but, it took us a year to do this CARA code, which is, relating to water that change, you know, to soil that turns to water, and there's certain areas where you shouldn't be building on it. So what happened was, developer D.R. Horton bought 2 houses and built 11 with injection wells, which again is what we don't want. 11 houses of 1.1 million and above. So I can see that happening. We have a lot of RS-12s. We no longer have RSs anymore. No longer have these single-family residence designations. So you have all of these city, in my area, Seaview, everywhere, or even down here.
I live in the bowl, not
Yeah.
very far from here.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love about my community and my street is we have a mix of everybody.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to change.
Yeah.
It's affordable for everybody. We have people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
If you walk down to the local area, you can be sitting next to anybody and you don't know who you're sitting
Right.
next to.
Yeah.
And it is a soft way to push the middle class right
Yeah.
out of Edmonds.
Yeah.
Okay, what can we go?
Yeah.
We go quick. Okay, so
Go
this
quick.
is kind of our get out the stage chart.
didn't get to read the previous slide because I
Oh.
was listening to
Okay.
you two.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna kind of recap it, but, this is just, somewhat summarizes, as the title says, what we had just talked about. I think we've touched on all these points. If we go to the next one, we're gonna, in terms of a financial recovery plan, when I think of financial recovery plan, this is the way I look at it. First, we're not gonna get to any of these bullet points unless we vote no, because it'll be a get out of jail free card. It'll be business as usual for the city and city council. So the only way we get to work through the rest of this is voting no. Unfortunately, I hate to have to say that, but that's the unfortunate reality, just based on working with the city over the years that I've had. So as you go through this, first thing, use the Blue Ribbon Panel's recommendation. One of their biggest recommendations was establish a finance board or commission to help the city council. Adhere to our current financial policies. I mentioned early on in November 23, we declared fiscal emergency. Our policy said, you, the city, need to come to the council with a recovery plan within 2 months. 2 years later, we still don't have one. So let's just adhere to what we currently have on the books, and we could be in a lot better shape than we're in now. Establish performance metrics. Kind of to your point, there's no one's held accountable. There's no performance metrics within any of the departments of the city. Revenue stabilization and recovery. We talked about where we can transfer money, the non-property tax revenue, and RFA annexation savings. So that's part of the revenue stabilization piece. Expenditure control and cost efficiency. Again, the cost efficiency. There's governments in general are somewhat wasteful. Okay, I get that, but I mean, you saw the chart, how quickly we went from $18 million down to near the red zone, and having to borrow on top of that to keep ourselves afloat. That goes all into here. We should never have been in this position that we're in right now. And then this is the piece that really doesn't get any discussion, is our debt management. It's almost like they want to pay for everything in cash. When was the last time anyone bought their house in cash? Right? That's where the debt strategy. We're not seeing a debt strategy being proposed for all of our high maintenance, the Francis Anderson Center, our utilities and things like that. We're seeing $14.5 million coming down at us to pay for all that in cash. I don't think so. I mean, the mayor at the Might Have Been Used interview last week, he acknowledged he's coming back to us for bond money. That's above and beyond the $14.5 million. Let's put it all on the table so we can see what this is all going to cost us in the next few years. He didn't quantify how much he's coming to us or when, but he did say he will be. And then, once we get through that, then we can kind of determine what levy we need. I think it was right around $6 million is probably in the ballpark. It's certainly not 14.5 from everything I'm looking at. But until you do this is when you start coming back to the people. You show them that you've done all of this. Okay, this is the bottom line. This is what we really need. And I haven't seen that happen. Okay. Let's see.
Any questions?
Any more questions?
Yes.
I am curious. I know you are, you don't take the threats of what's gonna close seriously, it doesn't sound like, but I do, because it directly affects my family, what we might lose as a community. And I know my kids feel it because they feel like they're told all the time, like, you should be off your screens, but we're gonna close everything that gives you the opportunity to be outside with friends connecting. I'm curious if these things close, if this doesn't pass, and we come back with a small levy later, the added cost of restarting things is so much higher than maintaining. Is that part of your calculation for a smaller levy later, or are we just saying, well, that stuff doesn't matter as much, so we can just let it go and come back for a smaller levy for other things?
What I think we tried to show here, obviously maybe we didn't get it across, is that we've got the money right now to keep everything open right now.
just
And
a
in
threat.
fact, you know, in fact, if you look at the monthly budget reports,
We're in good shape.
we're in pretty good, we could be